Hi, my COP 2220 students. This is Dennis. I'm your instructor. Just wanted to review that review assignment that was due yesterday. Um, so I did. I have the code in front of me. I'm just going to go through it. So at the top of everything you submit should be a comment header. You should at least have your name, maybe the date you wrote the code, and maybe some kind of like short sentence that describes what you're doing. Everything in this area right here, all I did was take these specifications from the slideshow and just write them. That doesn't need to be there, but I just didn't want to have to keep referring back and forth. So I am writing a code or a piece of code that's going to store up to $10,000 sales amounts in an array. The program is going to generate a random number between 500 and 10,000, and that will tell me of those 10,000 elements in the array how many I'm going to populate. I'm going to randomly populate those elements in the array with numbers between -5 and 999 inclusive, and then I'm going to output them in nice, organized, neat columns of 10, and then I'm going to display a summary, which should be the highest, lowest, and average of all the sales. So the next part is my preprocessor directives, this part right here. I'm always going to include the standard IO and the standard lib, but for this one I am doing a little bit of work with strings, so I'm going to include string.h. I include time.h because I need that for the I need that for the rand function. Thought I had that in here, but apparently I didn't. So as I was saying, I need time.h. I need this for the rand function. I like to define my constants up here. So all my constants are going to be in a capital letters. So size is a constant and it equals 10,000. I use that to create my array. I am using an old DOS command to clear the screen, and I gave it an alias CLS. So this and this are the same thing. This and this are the same thing. So this is an alias for this, and pause is an alias for system pause. I'm always going to prototype my functions, and that's always going to be next. So here's my prototypes. Apparently, besides main, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 functions. And notice I like to keep them in alphabetical order. The very first function I should always see when I look at your code is the main function. The main function is maybe going to declare a few variables, such as this array and this eSize. And then mainly, the main function is going to just be function calls. Note here that I have seeded the random number, the rand function, using sran. That's a one-time shot, only done in C. Other languages kind of do that behind the scenes. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is populate all my, or the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set that eSize. So I'm going to call this function get a random number, and I'm going to pass it the boundaries, the lower boundary and the upper boundary. So here's the function, get a random number, and basically I passed in the low and the high. This is a value returning function. So I like to say if it's a value returning function, take this data type, replace it, repeat it down here, and create a variable called result. I always use the name result. The last line is return result, and then what I do in the middle is I populate result. So it's kind of like a fill in the blank. And by the way, this little expression here came from my resource website. Make sure you're out there looking at that. There's hopefully a lot of good information for you. So once I set eSize, I use that to populate all the sales. That's why eSize was first. So now I'm going to go and look at this function, populate all sales. So here's the function, populate all sales. Here's the function way down here, populate all sales. And notice it's nothing but a for loop, and I'm using that same function I wrote, get a random number, but this time the lower bound is -5 and the higher bound is 999. So this is going to go through all eSize elements of the array sales, and it's going to place a number randomly between -5 and -999. Notice something else. Anytime I have a set of curly braces, and if you were in my on-site class, we call those mustaches, I always make a comment at the end of each one of these. End for loop, end populate sales. This is a void function because I don't need to return anything back. And the reason I don't need to return anything back is I am changing this array, but all arrays are passed by reference or passed by pointer, so there's no need to send them back. There's not a duplicate copy of this array in memory. So now I have the array populated. So the next thing I'm going to do is just display everything in that array. Display everything in that array. And that function is just right here. It's a void function because it's not returning anything back. The first thing I do, and you don't really need to do this, is I clear the screen. And then I call this cool little function, and I'll show you that a little bit later, called marquee, something I invented. And it's basically going to take this, here are the sales for the company, and it's going to put a marquee around it using equal signs. And you'll see that when I run this. So all I'm going to do is I am doing a for loop. And my for loop starts at 1 instead of 0, even though most for loops start at 0. I did that because of this mod function. If I start at 0, it's going to be true the first time, and I don't want that. So I'm going to loop from 1 to less than or equal to e size. What I'm going to do inside of that loop every time is I'm going to print on the same line the sale amount. Well, basically, it's going to do that 10 times. And once I do that 10 times, this is going to become true, and I'm just going to do a carriage return. At the end of that, I'm going to do another carriage return and pause, so there's some separation, and that's it for display all sales. My last routine is display sales summary. Display sales summary just does the high, low, and average. So when I do my display sales summary, when I do my display sales summary, which is right here, the first thing I do is I create a variable for low and I create a variable for high. I make the assumption that whatever's in sales sub 0, or the very first sale amount, is both the low and the high. And that's a safe assumption, and that's way better than setting low to some big number and setting high to some small number. The first number is special. It is low and high. I need to accumulate my sales so that I can compute the average, and that's what total is for. And my average is going to be computed and stored inside of this variable called average. Notice it's a floating point number, and I said 0.0. I don't need that 0.0, but to me that is plain as day that this is going to be a floating point number. So I clear the screen, I call that function called marquee that I'll show you in a minute, and I do nothing more than do some processing here. So in here I'm totaling the sales, and in here I am testing for the low, and each time if a current sale is lower than the lowest sale, I store it, and I do the same thing for high. At the end of that loop, I set the average, which is total divided by the effective size, a separation here, and then I just do my 3 output statements. And hopefully, even if you're my Python students, you're familiar with %.2f. That's going to display a floating point number with 2 places to the right of the decimal. I'm going to create another piece of separation, pause, and that's it. That's the entire program. Other than this marquee, let me show you that. So marquee, I expect a string to be passed in. What I'm going to do is, here's where I needed that string.h because I'm using strlen, which tells me the length of a string. I'm going to pad the length +6 because what that's going to look like is something like this. The +6 is I'm going to put 2 equal signs to the left of the message plus a space, and 2 equal signs to the right. So that is the size of this message +6. I'm going to move down one line. I'm going to tab over, and then this for loop is going to display the top row of equal signs. Once I'm done displaying the top row of equal signs, I'm going to move down one, tab over, and here's what I just showed you. My 2 equal, a space, the message, a space, 2 equal, a new line, and I tab over again after my message. And then this is the same as the code up here, but that displays my bottom row, and then I'm going to carriage return it. All right, so let's watch this run. I'm going to run this code. When the code runs, there is, let me go take a look at what I just Okay, real quick before I run it again, there was I don't know how it happened because I never made a change, so it's kind of weird, but this line had this /n and T reversed, the tab, so I have fixed it. Now let's watch it run one more time. When it runs, there is my marquee, as I said. Here is all of my sales in columns of 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And nice and neat. There's my pause at the end. I press any key to continue, and I cleared the screen using the marquee again. Here's my summary, my high, my low, and my average. That's it. Hopefully that helps you understand how I want you to lay out your code in the future. Thank you and have a good day.